first and foremost, I'll introduce myself before we start. My name is Steve Sutcliffe. I am the GM of Xref, and again, a little bit about why this came around. So we've recently integrated with PageUp, who a lot of our audience would know is a prominent ATS. So you can actually take Xrefs directly from that ATS. And when we were talking about a launch strategy and making sure that we work together as a partner, as you do, several ideas bounce around. And again, as every single person on this webinar will attest to, there is so much online content being fed out at the moment. Some of it relevant, some of it non-relevant, some of it informative. And I think between ourselves and PageUp, we've just got a really good client base of enterprise, mid-market and SMB clients. And the thought was that we'd get people not necessarily related to our product or ATS, but prominent people within the market, and we'd take some feedback from our clients. And I think ultimately the outcome of this is, I think first and foremost, there's a lot of people out there that have not necessarily engaged with many peers in their industry for some time, and probably just want to know that they're having the same form of struggles or positives. And I think the second part as well is that is some people just don't have the ability to have a network where they can just ask questions and make sure they're doing the right thing. So we put it out to our client base to come back with questions for us. So we could just have a question and answer, a panel, non-presentation wise. And we got 180 questions, which obviously in an hour would not be relevant or good viewing. So we decided to put that down into 7 questions. So over the next 45 minutes, we'll go through these 7 questions. If we've got time left at the end and anyone's got any additional questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll go through and we'll go from there. So first and foremost, thanks to PageUp for also partnering with us and extending to their client base, and then to the Xref clients, and then people who are not clients of both of us. Hopefully we find the hour informative and there's things that either resonate or it's just like, well, I'm glad we're doing similar things to that. So I'll hand over just as a brief introduction of their role types and the businesses they work for. But before that, David, are you okay to do an acknowledgement to country for us just before we start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on today. Pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm currently on the traditional lands of the Awabakal people. I'd like to extend my appreciation to their cultural heritage, beliefs and spiritual connections with this land. And I'd like to extend the acknowledgement to all the locations that we're on today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that, David. And then your role and what you do, just for a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So Dave Meir, I am the National Manager for Talent Attraction at Life Without Barriers. Life Without Barriers, we like to refer to it as the biggest not-for-profit you've never heard of. We work predominantly in the disability support space and also supporting children in out-of-home care, so in residential care or in foster care. We've got 7,000 employees nationally, and work in about 400 communities across Australia. My recruitment team is a centralised recruitment team. We've got 20 plus recruiters dotted around Australia, managing the recruitment of about 2,200 new hires each year. I want to acknowledge, I guess, at the start of this, that I know that there's a lot of organisations, a lot of recruitment functions really doing it tough and having to reduce in size, and I'm sorry to my peers that that's happening across a lot of sectors. The sad reality is, I guess, that the essential services that we provide will never go away, or not for some time. So we've actually had to increase our recruitment capacity, and we've currently got about 600 open roles that we're recruiting to across Australia. So on average, we've been averaging about 40 to 50 new hires joining us a week over the last 3 to 4 months. So a little bit of context of size, scale and who we are as an organisation.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. And I suppose difficult times at the moment when you're having to scale up a TA function and you've got lots of roles on when there is people doing it tough. But I suppose the positive out of that is that you're obviously got the ability to place people who've unfortunately not had roles extended, and then we're still moving forward. So Yeah, good to hear that there's still need out there for that T&A community and recruiters in different fields, allow people to get some different experience. And Ben, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Ben Girdler, I head up the talent acquisition function at News Corp. We've had a lot of challenges recently that have been very well documented across the news, part of passing cycle in the media. So we've gone from a team of 11 down to a team of 5 national recruiters. And we, in the last couple of years, have been looking at about 900 external hires. I think that will take somewhere between 400 to 600. So as Dave mentioned, you know, one of those ones that experiences a few challenges at the moment. So I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that, and we'll go through that as the presentation and the Q&A goes on.
Yeah, good. And again, some healthy numbers that we're still hiring. I think that, you know, there's positives to take about this, that the industry's not stopped. You know, again, from Xref's perspective, we look at non-essential and essential hiring on a sort of weekly basis and make sure that we're across who's hiring and what we're doing as well. So yeah, good to hear that there's still some healthy numbers, although down. And then Nikki, a sort of different set of skills and experience from your perspective. What do you do?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Nikki McCulloch. I'm the Director of Client Solutions at Hudson RPO. Been with Hudson RPO for coming up to 10 years and in the recruitment industry for over 20. At Hudson RPO, we provide outsourced recruitment solutions for organisations from a kind of, I guess, what we term a total talent solution, where we look after all permanent and contingent hires. We then have just permanent hiring solutions or contingent workforce solutions, so MSP. We also work with internal teams from an augmented perspective as well. We've got coming up to 25 clients in Australia at the moment. And it's been a real kind of mixed bag for us in terms of hiring volumes, who's been impacted negatively, unfortunately, and who've actually kind of seen real spikes in hiring. So I think if I'll focus on kind of the industry that's been busiest. So certainly we've got a strong footprint in the pharmaceutical healthcare sector. And those clients have seen obviously quite extreme spikes in hiring at some stages. But yeah, very, very interesting time for us. So really looking forward to kind of sharing some insights with you today.
Yeah, good. So let's crack in. I suppose that's what it is about, that just sharing the insights today. So I will go to the first question. When you have an increased number of applications, what's the best approach to rejecting candidates whilst providing a good experience? So again, I don't think this is necessarily a question that's come up because of the situation that we're in. I think the more that time I spend in this industry, the more it comes up over and over again, and people treating their brands and candidates like customers, and you've got, you know, good examples from McDonald's and people like that as well. So I'll throw it to Ben first. What's your experience in this, Ben?
Yeah, this is something we've got to be really mindful of, because as you per your example, McDonald's are our candidates and our customers, and they'll quite often still buy our newspapers or consume our media elsewhere. So we've got to be really mindful of this. And I think it does happen depending on the type of role that you're trying to recruit for. So there's always certain roles that generate a high volume of applicants. So the key thing for me is first off honesty with your response to them, and also the timeliness of it. You know, work your calendar time and just give a response as soon as you can, and ensure that you do it, because ultimately, although they may not get the response they want, if you give it to them in a timely and honest fashion, people will tend to respect that.
Yeah, good. And again, I suppose, question to you, applications, whilst we've not got as many open roles going, has the application pool, has that increased?
Depends for which type of role. So there's a higher increase of applicants that are kind of immediately available and who may have been impacted due to the current economic climate. But it's not gone up hugely. I think some people are a bit more hesitant to apply for roles because they want to have that job security in their current position. But overall, it's been pretty consistent. It really depends on the type of role that you're recruiting for. So, for example, we look at a lot of cyber risk roles they're a really tough to source role. So it's a lot of it is proactive search. But for anyone that does apply, just focus on giving honest, transparent feedback in as quick as possible time frame.
Yeah, thank you. And then to you, David, obviously you've got lots of open roles. Have you got a candidate shortage, or is it more applications? How are you looking at the moment?
Yeah, look, we're certainly receiving more applications in some locations than others. We have a lot of remote regional recruitment, and we still have challenges with the number of applications we get there and the low number. But I guess from this perspective, if I think about it, there's 4 things that I consider with regards to feedback. Firstly, you've got to ask yourself, what expectation, what reasonable expectation would you have of each stage of the recruitment process if you had applied for a role? I think secondly, I always ask myself the question, if a good friend of one of our executive team applied for a role and provided feedback to their experience to that executive, would you be satisfied that you had an appropriate level of interaction with that person, depending on which stage of the recruitment process they were at? Then the third thing, absolutely, if this individual is potential candidate is a potential customer, what's the experience you want to give them as well? And I think the fourth thing, I think we've just all got to be a bit mindful of the sourcing channels that we use. At the moment, you've got to consider what your best approach is. And that might be, going through talent pools that you already have, as opposed to opening it up for hundreds of applications for certain roles. So look, we receive 70,000 plus applications a year. So look, at the first stage, if you don't make through to interview, you're informed via email, and we've consistently done that. But what we've also done over the last couple of years is, in that email notification, ask them to follow us on either our Facebook careers page or our LinkedIn page, and set up job alerts for roles that may be of interest to them in their relevant area and location, basically. And that's seen our followers double year on year, basically. So that, updating that notification and actually asking them to find out more about us and keep in touch, basically, has been a really positive thing. But certainly at interview stage, prompt feedback via phone with concise amount of feedback. But the positive thing we've noticed is the last 3 or 4 months we've made a lot of direct appointments, not having to advertise roles for contract roles, because we've had people in our talent pipelines that we've had good engagement with. So it's actually helped us a great deal, because we haven't had to advertise and respond to large volumes of applicants.
Yeah, good point. And then at what point, because obviously it's a lot like most industries, that you only ever hear feedback when you've not done a particularly good job. At what point do you, how do you engage in that candidate pool? I mean, 70,000 candidates is an awful lot. How do you engage and make sure the process is relevant, applicable, and they've got the opportunity to give feedback?
Yeah, as you said, for 70,000, it's tough. But certainly at that, once we've got people to interview, or the one-way video interview that we'll talk about in a little while, we're always on the phone. And if those candidates seem to have kind of attributes and values that we think will fit our organisation, we'll try to remain in touch with them. It can be difficult at the front line, but we do make a lot of placements through our talent pools. I'd say 10–15% are made through our talent pools.
Yeah, brilliant. And then Nikki, I suppose again different experiences here where your business is around representing someone else's brand that they may not know that you're actually doing. So probably even more important for you to keep that 25 clients in Australia is that you've got a service where you're constantly getting positive feedback. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because kind of one of our KPIs that our teams are held against, and it's reported back regularly to our clients, is candidate satisfaction. And I'd say the candidate and hiring manager satisfaction is probably the most important kind of performance measure of our teams. So, we do take, I guess, a a best practice approach to candidate rejection across our solutions, and it's probably the things that Ben and David have already touched on and talked about. It's that, verbal communication to anyone who's been interviewed, timely feedback, etc. But we do tailor that for each client, and I think what we try and do is make sure that we're optimizing whatever technology that client is using, or we will introduce technology as well. So I think that, the sophistication that we see now in applicant tracking systems and CRM platforms, to be able to actually tailor candidate journeys, even when they are unsuccessful, really does see a very positive outcome for every candidate who may be even rejected just at that application stage, but it's very targeted and they are then invited to re-engage with the brand. And I think that that's really important. The other comment I would just make, and I've been seeing a lot of discussions around this on LinkedIn in particular over the past few weeks, with a lot of organisations seeing a huge spike in applications, there has been a lot of that kind of putting at the bottom of the job advert, if you're not successful, you won't hear from us. And I think it's just, if we let that happen, we've gone backwards 10 years. And I think it's a terrible thing for our industry to be saying something like that. And I know people are very passionate about it. So I would just completely echo those passionate people of that is just a terrible look. Every person who applies deserves, feedback and to understand where their application's at.
Great.
And I think with technology the way it is and the automation set up in even rudimental ATSs or CRMs, you should be able to do that fairly easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, it needs to be constantly monitored and updated and refreshed, but it's not rocket science. It's really not. And I think most of these systems are so intuitive and so candidate focused now, because everyone realizes that the candidate experience is, one of the most important parts of a successful recruitment function. That it's not difficult.
Good. And then just before we move on, and I did say I'd throw random questions out there that are not scripted, but Ben, David, have you ever thought about putting KPIs around, or do you have the specific KPIs around candidate experience on this rejection?
So we don't have a specific KPI around it yet. We've set up our ATS so that all candidates have a response before we can close the job. And then we can do candidate surveys and candidate feedbacks as well. But something that we do, and it's kind of similar to what Dave mentioned earlier around what would an exec experience if they applied, is we just regularly test our own application process. And I think that's key, just to ensure, your communications are all up to date. It's mobile enabled or tablet enabled or what have you, or just to make sure that it's as easy as possible for the candidate to make the application and receive the communication, the appropriate communication back.
Good point. David?
Yeah, look, we don't have particular KPIs set up. We do run surveys, but they're actually only for successful candidates. So we're probably not creating enough listening posts right now, I guess, to hear the experience of those who've been unsuccessful, perhaps. But certainly, one of the things we do track is the number of second, third applications we get, and they suggest we're not doing a terrible job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, as we move on, I'm quite interested, obviously, is Nikki working as an external coming in and the KPIs around the department and then internal ones. So yeah, I suppose as a start for a first question, really good insights around the different ways we can do things. What's your advice, concerns on hiring overqualified candidates? And again, this is probably a really timely question based on the economic climate, where we're going from, some of the redundancies that have been made. Obviously, there's some very senior people with amazing skill sets out there that potentially wouldn't apply for roles that they are based on, just the need for work. David, where's your thoughts on this?
Yes, look, I think we've got to be clear about what the expectations are in the role to start with. There's no point in, hiring a seasoned financial accountant if it's an entry-level role that just needs good attention to detail and data entry skills, basically. So I do think we need to be be mindful of that. From a very personal experience, we recruited a number of new recruitment advisors recently, and they were really for volume recruitment. We needed 6 to 12 months experience in the role, and we were getting applications from people with 20 plus years experience. While we appreciate they bring an enormous amount of life experience and recruitment experience, the question will be, will they still be challenged by that role in 9 months' time, in 12 months' time? I guess it makes me nervous because, and I appreciate a lot of people have been impacted. There'll be people on this call that have been impacted. One of the things that make me nervous is that I've heard a lot of people use the term any port in a storm of late. And that's a phrase that's being used a lot. And that just gives me pause for concern when you look at hiring people who are overqualified for a role.
And that's a really honest answer to that as well, because again, the default is like we're constantly looking to increase and strive senior leadership, etc. But as you say, it comes with risks, and it's more so about engaging the actual candidate itself and making sure that you can provide that challenge. So yeah, I really appreciate the honesty in that response. Nikki, again, I'm assuming that you, across the businesses that you work in, you're getting feedback an awful lot. How do you cope with it, or what are your techniques at the moment?
Yeah, and I agree that was a really honest response, David, because I think that the immediate concern is, oh, well, I'll hire this person, invest in them, and they'll leave as soon as they get a better opportunity that's more suited to their skill set. I think the only way anyone can approach this is with a kind of completely honest, transparent conversation up front with that candidate as to what are their motivations and their expectations. Because what I have seen is senior people overlooked in the past who actually are deliberately looking for a role with less accountability for a variety of reasons, who actually will commit to that role for the standard amount of time, whether that's 2, 3 years, 18 months, whatever you would see your normal candidates stay. However, I think that there are people who would be really honest with you, no, this isn't my dream job, I need something for 6 months. And I think that the spin that we are kind of trying to put our teams, around is, well, perhaps you could hire those people on a contractual basis. If you're struggling to find the skill set, bring them on as a contract. They're still looking for their ideal opportunity. You've got your role filled while you're looking for your ideal candidate. So it can be quite a nice kind of balance there. Again, it's just about that honest, transparent conversation. And I don't think we can apply a kind of sweeping statement across that category of people, especially right now where we are going to see, a lot of people are really doing it tough, to be honest.
Yeah, and I suppose in that as well, like I said, it's not a sweeping statement, because depending on where your businesses are and the role that you're hiring, it may be an opportunity for some businesses to really get some candidates that wouldn't not necessarily look at their companies, whether or not be brands that they'd like to or perceive that worked from before. It'd be a really good time to engage in a senior talent pool that potentially wouldn't look at your business. Would that be fair to say as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially if you kind of took the contractual approach of, and then getting someone in with an amazing skill set and a vaster experience than you would potentially get before for, a period of time. I just think, God, that's an amazing benefit for your organization. And I guess it's another talent pool that you wouldn't have access to in more traditional times.
Yeah, good. Well, that's a good answer. From your guys' perspective, have you had to change things again? Less process perspective, more like how do you engage the candidate? What's that first 30, 60, 90 days? How do you build that affinity to your brand, your culture, their social responsibilities, how you interact, how they should behave in the workplace? David, how have you done that?
Yeah, well, I look at it 2 ways, I guess. So in reality, I guess the majority of our staff actually are working in people's homes. So working in, supported independent living environments, supporting people to live their own lives and their best lives, or working in homes where we've got kids in residential care, basically. So actually, that is still occurring. There's been no real change to that. It's all face-to-face delivery, etc. But I will call out, just from a process perspective, that one of the technologies we've got, which integrates into our applicant tracking system, PageUp, has been HR Onboard, and that's enabled us to generate, review and distribute employment contracts and new hire paperwork. We've had that in place for more than 3 years now, so we actually don't need anyone to physically sign any documents or anything like that. So that's been great from a process perspective. From a people's perspective, as I said, for those in the front line, it's not changed much. However, we have had to give them a lot more training around good practices in homes. And we've done some of that online basically, and had our new starters complete that online. From an office-based worker perspective, what we've been doing is actually asking the question if they're comfortable with catching up outside somewhere for a walk and talk on their first morning, basically. And so they get to actually meet their manager, they get to spend some time with them, they go for a walk, it creates that connection, basically. And then, from there, Microsoft Teams has been invaluable to us in the last 3 months. We've been using that significantly.
Good. And I think, again, with the teams, and again, that's something we've used internally as well. Have you found, and again, this is like a technology and process perspective, but becomes maybe a little bit over-reliant on teams, and we've lost that let's just pick up the phone and ask a question. Is that something that you've found, or has it worked positively for you guys?
Look, I'm spent at the end of most days. At the moment, 6 hours of video conferences each day. So I'm absolutely spent just visually trying to pick up, cues from 6, 7, 8 different people on video has been exhausting. I can't tell you how much I appreciate a phone call at the moment. I think we have perhaps gone a little too far in that connection.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and I think some of the comments we've had from our teams is that there's been such a focus on keeping everybody still engaged now that we're working remotely that I agree, David, it's gone too far, and suddenly people are being asked to dial in for 5 p.m. drinks with people that they would never have had a drink with in the real world before, and it's just kind of like extending their day. And I think everyone's got the right intention of keeping those connections, but I think we've probably gone too far, and we haven't quite got the balance yet of when a phone call is okay and when you don't need to engage in the social things that perhaps you wouldn't have in the past. I think definitely, I think Zoom plays to the extroverts in our workforce as well, and I think can not be so enjoyable for an introvert. However, somebody did make a comment to me that perhaps it allows a more level playing field for those who wouldn't normally speak up. So I think that's an interesting thing for someone to go and explore as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I've had 2 peers join, one national manager for health safety and national manager for people safety, culture business partnering. One's in Melbourne, one's in Brisbane, and one of them commented that she feels incredibly engaged with everyone from a peer group perspective. She's met all of our kids, knows what kind of pets we have, has seen our houses, etc. But she has no idea how tall any of us are, because she's never seen anything but a torso, basically. So it is an interesting one. We've suddenly got this engagement that sees the personal very much bleeding into the professional, and the professional bleeding into the personal as well. As a live example, my young sons, who are 2 and 3 year old, when I'm working from home for the first couple of months, they were in here, on a regular basis, wanting to see who was on the video conference. They've got no interest in it anymore. The only thing they're interested in is at the end of the day coming in and turning off my computer, so they know that Dad will focus on them, basically. So it's been interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, and again, I think at the start of this, when we said, some people would just take comfort that other people experience the same. I think that Teams, workplace chat or Slack I think it's very easy to become reliant on that. And again, it's something I take from that today. Again, like as soon as you find yourself writing a response, it's probably a cue to pick up the phone. So yeah, good feedback. And then Ben, from your perspective, anything changed from a process? Have you put in a cheat sheet or a tick for hiring managers just to say, look, this is what our expectations are of onboarding someone now?
Yeah, there's not been a huge change. I think the main thing is you lose that kind of contact with someone who just sits opposite you or sits next to you, that you can ask them those little questions that you may not necessarily know where to look or where to find the answer to. So we've encouraged a buddy system who's not necessarily your direct manager, someone outside of that, potentially within your team if possible. So you can ask them those little questions and have that fail safe there if there is anything you're unsure of. I definitely agree with the Zoom fatigue. I think when we first started, we were doing fancy dress and God knows what, and now that's kind of slidden off the radar. But I think the key thing is just to make sure that onus isn't always necessarily on the company or the employer. The employee needs to be engaged as well, and you need to manage those expectations from the start. This is who you should ask, or this is where you need to go. And then on the flip side of that, anyone who's on the receiving end of that should always be willing to help. We're really lucky here at News. We've got a great bunch of people that will help out wherever they can. So the key thing is make sure that the new employee isn't achieve that, then you're in a good place.
Yeah, good. And I suppose that, again, we've all touched on that soon. I think everyone across all business would freely admit that, because no one knew where this was going or what was happening. Again, it was just that's how we thought that we should be engaging with teams and increase the amount of internal meetings, etc. And I think, as we've all said there, we've come to a realization it's probably not as positive. And as you said there, with the Microsoft Teams or Workplace or Slack, I think that would, that'll surpass. The next thing will be more phone-based communication as well, and get back to that. So again, really good insights to sort of, everyone's doing roughly the same things and making the same mistakes. We're not unique. It's good to hear some other industry sort of experts, some people that are hiring large volumes, different role types, that there is no right and wrong, and as long as they've got someone to talk to that you're trying to engage and introduce them to your culture, you're not far off doing the wrong thing. And I assume, and again, I'm hopefully I'll be correct in this, candidates are a little bit more forgiving of an onboarding process at this point. Would that be true?
I think so, yeah. And I think just to kind of pick up on a point you made there as well, Steve, around making a mistake, I think no one really cares that much if you make a mistake, but it's about how quickly you learn from it and make the necessary changes. So don't be afraid to fail. Just really recognize the failure and then learn from it and adjust. And that's the key thing. And if you do that, then your employees and your teams will respect and continue to follow you. Yeah.
Good, yeah, really valid point at the end there as well. And the next question, I'm on it. So this would be, and again, whether it's something that you believe in, something that you don't believe in, something that you think works for certain roles, something you don't think works for certain roles. I could do this at C-level, or it's more for bulk recruitment. The reality is, video interviews, that be as a pre-screening or as part of the process, it's just the norm now. What's the candidate's experience been? And again, is there any tips that you could give to the guys of, even things just such as practical as the length and setting agendas or anything like that? Do you want to just sort of, again, just give some direction of what's worked, what's not worked? Do you want to go first, Ben?
Yeah, sure. So we've used a video platform, Sonru, for just over 12 months now, and it worked really well for us. But what we tried to do in the implementation stage was use it for all types of roles, and we quickly learned that was a mistake because of the feedback we were getting. So I think the key thing is, first off, give everyone the option to opt out and do a traditional phone screen or what have you. But secondly, don't try and use a one-size-fits-all approach. It would be similar to sending a coding test to a salesperson, for example. Utilize it where you're trying to assess certain things. So we use it a lot for roles where we want to demonstrate good communication skills, good business partnering skills, or an ability to think on the hop. So utilize it for the right type of video. And as well as that, just keep it short and concise when you're doing that video screen initially. We try and keep it below 5 questions. A couple just to settle the candidate in, talk me through your experience. Why do you want to work for us? Before then having 2 or 3 questions, which really focus on the requirements of the role and a specific response. And it's those 2 or 3 questions that a hiring leader might focus on more so when they're reviewing and assessing the response. I think in the current climate, particularly with remote working, you're going to see video interviews prevalent throughout the interview process. That's going to be a necessity. But again, it's all around in that situation, setting an agenda, trying to build up a rapport first as you would do in a face-to-face interview, not diving straight in, trying to get to know a little bit, making each other feel at ease, because ultimately you don't want to go in there stiff as a board and not perform and then go back and regret it. So try and build that rapport and treat it the same as you would a face-to-face.
Yeah, it's really, and again, I think it's probably something that I've not thought about as much during this period, that the amount of video interviews that you guys are doing on a candidate basis, where again, face-to-face interaction, slightly different dynamic, less tiring, less repetitive, etc. But it must be really difficult for some TA and recruiters at the moment that are doing multiple video interviews on a daily basis with the same questions. It'd be hard for them to really engage the candidate as well.
I think that depends. I mean, it depends on how you manage your day, but and also if you're doing a 1-way or a 2-way video interview. So the 1-ways are great in terms of convenience, because the user can do it at their own convenience as well as the applicant. So that's great in terms of a time saving, particularly when you're doing senior appointments and you've got some really busy schedules. They can be really beneficial. But yeah, I think in terms of your point of your interview, your video interview, your 2-way, you've got to have that same issue in a face-to-face interview as well. So it's just making sure you manage the diary appropriately. Don't do back-to-back 5 hours straight. Anyone's going to be sick of that. So just having a sensible approach, giving yourself a bit of time to bounce back and making sure you empathise with the candidate and have that empathy throughout.
Yeah. And David, Nikki, any different sort of opinions on that? Have you seen it working well, not working well? Is there any sort of insights that you want to share as well?
Yeah, the only comment I'd make is just around, we actually use the 1-way interviewing platform Sonru as well, and we implemented it 4 years ago, and we implemented it for everyone, basically for all roles. And at the time, after a small number of months, we realised that it was over 50% of our frontline kind of disability support workers, residential support workers, were dropping out of the recruitment process at that stage. So we pulled it, and we only used it for corporate and management level roles, basically. But in response to COVID-19, we had to use it again, or we decided to use it again. And what's been really interesting is that we've seen over 85% completion rate of those frontline workers now. So those frontline workers are appreciating that technology is the new norm, and they have to be able to engage with it. It's also setting a bit of a standard as well. With our online learning management system, for example, like you've got to be capable of utilising this type of technology. So it actually, in one way, it sets a barrier up that we need, because if they can't engage with that technology, then there's other technology that they need to do their job in the front line in corporate that they will struggle with. So it's actually been an interesting kind of realisation that the candidate behaviours change significantly, and the willingness to engage with that 1-way interview has increased significantly. And I look from a actual 2-way interview perspective, the likes of Zoom, Whereby, which is free, and Microsoft Teams, we've been using a combination of them. And I think all in all, candidates are appreciative that they're not being asked to get into an office, not being asked to catch public transport potentially to go to an office. They can do it from their own home. And I guess the reality is as well, we've got to understand whether or not because, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but the likelihood of remote working will continue. So we've got to be confident that they can productively work from their own home base as well.
Yeah, which is a question I think a lot of businesses had thought about, not necessarily think it would have to come so quickly, so it's probably been in time. Nikki, is there anything you'd add there from obviously multiple sites? Do you use it in all locations? Not all locations is a thing.
Yeah. So we work with Sonru, Spark Hire. We've recently implemented Interview Stream across a number of our solutions, which is just a fabulous tool. What I really like about that is it's kind of your one-way and your two-way videos, but the candidate gets to kind of book in their own video interviews, which is excellent. I think overwhelmingly we are getting the feedback that candidates are loving the video interview with the two-way video interview, and I think that it is, particularly when you're employed, it's really hard, as we know, to kind of sneak out of work, put on your interview suit, come back to work without people knowing what you're doing. So I think the ease of that video interview is definitely going to stay, and I think even if we do go back to kind of fully working in the office, I think that needs to remain as an option for candidates. We do consistently get in our candidate surveys where they have gone through the kind of one-way video screen as part of the process, that it's a daunting aspect of the recruitment process. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And I think what we try and do to combat that is we make sure that we've actually got hiring managers from the client or our own recruitment team who are actually videoed and are asking those questions, so that they actually are kind of dealing with a real person. We also make sure that we send videos out to our candidates about exactly what to expect throughout that process as well. So we just try and provide as much information as possible and try and just remove the stress. We've been able to use that one-way video interviewing really successfully actually at one of our clients recently, hiring for a job family that you didn't need specific experience for, but we were just looking for communication and customer service. And we put every single application through that initial video screen. And as a result, candidates were processed and hired that if it had done based on a resume would never have happened. So we've definitely got its place. I think it's about making sure that candidates aren't terrified by the prospect of it.
Yeah, good information. Yeah, and again, I suppose that's if we pull positives out of the time like this, I think in that answer there, again, it's like that resume or hiring people that we wouldn't have necessarily looked at in previous times, just on the basis that we were doing a process. It ultimately says that process was incorrect, and there's different ways to do things for outcomes. So last one. So 5 minutes, and on this, and if you want to do it, rather than just ask a question, again, we've got SMB people on the call, enterprise, mid-market, pharmaceutical, government, etc. Do you want to just maybe sort of highlight like some tools that you've come across or used that are in this particular time of helping out, and just name drop a few and where you think that things are going particularly well, or some things, and again, some might be too expensive for clients, or some might not necessarily fit with their tech stack. But David, is there anything that you've looked at recently the way you're like, right, that's made me think about this, and this is the tool that I found applicable?
Absolutely. And look, I guess, we've been fortunate, well, I've been fortunate that our organisation has invested well in technology for some time now, not just within the recruitment space, but across others. And so the systems we're using and I'm advocating for, we've had a really good experience with Sonru, have for many years, with Xref, with DocuSign for police checks and probity checks, and with HR on board. But I guess the call out for me is when you're looking at applicant tracking systems, for my approach is to look at kind of best in breed in all of those different things, and that will change over time. So my call out is if you're looking for something, an applicant tracking system, or you feel like you've outgrown yours, just look for something that integrates well with others, and look to work with an organisation that plays well with others, basically. And that's certainly been our experience with PageUp. We've got all of those technologies which we've had in place for a while integrate into PageUp, which means that we've got an efficient project, an efficient kind of process from a recruitment team's perspective. We've got a really positive hiring manager experience, but the candidate is feeling the same thing the whole way through the process, basically. We use it, it's integrated, so candidates only ever have to fill out one piece of information once, and it just integrates into those other things. So it's a positive thing from that perspective. But as I said, my main call out when looking at an applicant tracking system or any technology is that it integrates with others, and that the organisation wants to play well with others. It has a positive attitude towards that.
It's a really good point, and I'll move, because again, I think as someone that works in tech and tech sales, the amount of horror stories that I hear where people have been told to purchase a one-stop shop because it does everything, when the reality is that with open API technology and integrations, you've got that flexibility to choose a best-of-breed tool that sits within your ecosystem. So yeah, really, I'd sort of reiterate that and say really good point when you're looking at it. Now, we've got a minute left. Nikki, do you want to just, again, you've got experience with sort of 25 brands, want to just drop a few names and then we'll wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess I'm really lucky in that I get to kind of look at all the new tech and think about, gosh, which solution or organisation would this well suit. Completely agree on the integration piece. The other key thing I think it's critical that you look at when you're investigating any new technology is their roadmap. And what does that look like over the next couple of years? Because as we know, the new shiny thing, in next week, there's another new shiny thing. So you want to make sure if you're making that investment up front that product keeps developing. I'll do a bit of a name drop actually. I haven't worked with this product yet, but I'm investigating at the moment. And I just think something really interesting to look out for. Their name is Curious Thing. Don't know if anyone on this panel's heard of them, but they actually, it's a fully AI kind of bot phone interview that I've seen a demo of that is, yeah, quite mind-blowing, and I'm still researching it, but I would say if you've got some time, go and have a look at that, because I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer if it takes off.
There you go. Well, look, on that note, we'll finish up. We won't take any questions because I think we're running a fair way over, but again, just to sort of wrap up there, thanks so much guys for sharing those insights and again, just the honesty of some of those answers. I think hopefully some of the attendees will go away from this and just get a bit of clarity that we're all in a similar boat and we're all making sense of what is right or what's wrong. I think Ben, you made that great point where it's like, let's just fail fast. Put the candidate at the top priority and the employee, and make sure that we're trying to think about what their experience looks like. So David, Ben, Nikki, thank you very much for your time. To everyone that's logged on, obviously Xref and PageUp appreciate you coming through here. We will send out a recording of the webinar. Feel free to pass this on to any peers within inside of your network, and there'll also be a questionnaire on there as well around receiving some additional information. And if you feel this has been beneficial, again, we're happy to keep continuing doing these. We just want to make sure that the content's relevant and we're not dictating a set of topics, and more so that we've just been able to collaborate with people that have got different experiences. So we would like to get some feedback on whether this has been beneficial as well. But a big thank you to everyone that's logged on. Hope everyone battles the next 12 weeks in as best as possible fashion. And again, a big thanks to the guys answering the questions and their honesty. But yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for dialing in.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.